So, I forgot the water again. Damn. Always the same story. So, welcome back, fellow listener. Another live with our book. I forgot to upload on YouTube the previous one, but I can do it this evening, I think, or tomorrow. I don't really know. I try to do it one day or another. It's pretty hard this week because it's the first week of war or of normal war for me. Anyway, we are here to continue our reading of Artifact of Evil, the first Dungeons & Dragons Greyhawk adventure, the first Dungeons & Dragons... I'm tired, I retry. Artifact of Evil, the second Greyhawk adventure book and the second Guard the Rogue book. Now it's better. It is set in Greyhawk, the first, now it's correct, first setting of Dungeons & Dragons, and is written by Gygax. Good, then, well, why we continue? We are interrupted yesterday at chapter 6, when our heroes, a pretty numerous group now, 12 men and one woman, travel across the Iuz forest in searching of the second part of the anonymous Artifact of Evil, who can awake the sleeping god Tarisdun. Well, other than our heroes, also the Scarlet Brotherhood are searching for the artifact for awaken their god, their evil god. Then, let's begin for today, chapter 7. Guard hadn't thought it possible, but the forest here was worse than the southern portion they had to traverse coming from the Draken's Grabs to reach Bedwall. Guard had spent a surprising amount of time in such places, considering he was a city-bred thief, and no forest he had ever traveled in, even the great ones of Netherwood and Adri, had been like this. However, thanks to the woodcraft of Galdor, Curley and his associates, and Blanc as well, they made fair progress and never became lost in the thickets and tangles of the Iuz. Deirdre and Oscar had been in the same region, and with Guard available to clamber unerringly up trees to visually scout their way, the group managed to move westward at the rate of almost 2 leagues each day as the crow flies. They actually traversed nearly twice that distance, considering the twists and turns of their path as they followed trails or watercourses. The journey was further slowed by ravines and marshes that had to be circumvented, predators to be avoided, and the monstrous denizens of the place to constantly guard against. There were also the back trail to watch, for they knew full well that fiery repulse at copse of trees had not deterred pursuit. Every sort of craft and humor possible was used to conceal and make dangerous the path the party followed. Pits with sharpened stakes were prepared by a combination of magic and manual labor. Snares, deadfalls, and spring traps were set along their route. The druidical powers of Curly, Greenleaf, and Galdor were yoked with the magic of the wizard Oscar to create novel surprises such as sticks suddenly turning into venomous snakes when someone passed, trees that would become partially sentient and attack with their great limbs, and the like. They hoped thus to throw off or slow any followers so as to make their own mission a success. If they could locate their goal, it should take no more than a day to finish their work and push on westward, out of the Iuz and into the clean air of the elven kingdom of Selene and beyond. Whatever they were doing, it seemed to be working. Going through the forest on a northwesterly axis, the party managed to reach the banks of the Jewel River 8 days after entering the gloom of the Iuz. They encountered remarkably few hostile creatures on the trip, and all agreed that this was probably due to their own remarkable state of alertness and preparation. Creatures avoided them, for their group certainly constituted a formidable threat to anything they were likely to come across, dragons and swarms of humanoids notwithstanding. An unwary hunter was soon devoured by other carnivores, and this party was never unwary. On the east bank of the Jewel, Curly Greenleaf finally broke out his secret information. It was a reproduction of an ancient map that crudely depicted the area they were in at a time long past. This drawing showed that there was a city just a few miles, as far as they could determine, anyway, north of their present position. But anyway. 2 days of trekking up the Jewel discovered nothing. However, there was no thought of turning back, for the map couldn't be that inaccurate, and the force pursuing would be coming from that direction anyway. They sat down that night for a council once again. Guard had been thrown into Deirdre's proximity many times during the past week, and now he could at least tolerate her without difficulty. She showed no personal antagonism either, brushing aside his proffered apology with a comment about males having to prove their superiority, while females always demonstrated the masculine effort to be fruitless. Because she obviously believed this, Gord actually reacted in a manner that tended to reinforce Deirdre's assertion. But when he realized the trap he was in, Gord quickly ceased his efforts to do anything other than excel at his own profession and otherwise keep his own counsel. Thus they now interrelated well enough to exchange ideas freely and to contribute to the overall aims of the group. Everyone studied the old map, no doubt crudely drawn originally. It nonetheless had been copied with exacting care. From what they could determine, they had to be within a few miles of their goal. Only the ruin of the ancient city did not seem to exist. Many things were possible, but the entire cities did not just disappear. Could it have been razed? If torn down stone by stone, a place such as the map depicted could be made to vanish, but there was no legend or tale that even hinted at this happening, and nothing of the sort in history, of course. Perhaps the whole thing was a fable, perhaps, but with so much evidence at hand, albeit information of cryptic sort that seemed doubtful. In college, God said idly, we spent some time in the study of natural history. Over ages, even the greatest of rivers change their courses, do they not? You've eaten on it! You have eaten on it, Deirdre shouted, slamming God on the back so hard he nearly choked. Without even knowing it, she announced to the others. This city-bred commoner has solved a riddle even I couldn't. No offense, Guard, or the rest of you for that matter. It's just that we of nobler birth are expected to bear a greater burden in such matters. Well, I say now's no time for chit-chat, but for action. Just so, Gallor agreed, casting on an understanding smile at Guard, and then a broad grin at the rest. Our good cavalier here may not be diplomatic, but she is eager and willing. Let us press on now from a vantage point on the river bank. We can determine what needs to be investigated. Leaving the clearing, the 13 adventurers cut through the heavy underbrush down a steep bluff of some 20 or 30 feet, and were soon on the relatively open bank of the river. The wizard cast one of his spells, levitating upward 100 yards, then 200, surveying the wall of the surrounding territory. Oscar dropped downward like a stone then, evidently wary of possible attack by flying monsters when in such an exposed position. Gordon was interested in the technique, for the wizard suddenly slowed his descent, floating much as a leaf in a gentle breeze for the final 50 feet of the descent. Ring of feet are falling, Deirdre told him before he could ask anyone. There is a marshy place across the river to the south, Oscar told the waiting company. I could see streams at least 2 large ponds there also. My supposition is that the jewel once flowed through that area and has moved eastward since. Was there anything like ruins? Buildings, walls, anything? Demanded Greenleaf. The wizard considered for a moment. No, there were no visible signs of any construction, but something did seem unusual. Out with it, man, cried Galler. The western side of the river is... Oh, sorry, this is the voice of Galler, sorry. The western side of the river is lower than this side, you know. I saw a few hills and ridges, but that wasn't what interested me. Half a league downstream, about at the midpoint of the marsh there, is a small peninsula, more a point of land actually. It is wooded, indicating... I'm sorry, wrong voice, this is Oscar. It is wooded, indicating it is higher than the surrounding marsh-covered ground and had several knolls and mounds on it. I fear it isn't much of a hope, but that's all I can give us to go on. The ancient city could, after all, have been washed away or covered by the jewel when some cataclysm changed its course. The river where they stood was a long bow shot across no more. If there were narrower places, they weren't nearby. Soil was decided to cross to the west bank immediately and work southward from there. That way no risk of encountering oncoming pursuers was likely, although Oscar pointed out it would mean going through 200 or 300 yards of swampy ground. Getting across with the horses was dangerous, for the river was both deep and swift. Furthermore, we knew what creatures lurked below the surface. Anything from giant garfish or pike to monstrous snapping turtles might be lying in wait for a meal. Although they dislike doing it, Curly Greenleaf and his associates, Ash Grover and Lorman, located a small herd of deer and after much effort managed to drive them into the water near where the party planned to cross. These creatures swam across the river, the current carrying the downstream so that their course toward the opposite shore was a diagonal one. Just as the deer were past the midpoint of the channel, and as the group was already beginning to swim in the wake of the herd, something struck. There was a great swirl in the water, and one of the deer simply vanished. 1 second its head was visible, the next only ripples showed where it had been. From their prone positions, none of the adventurers could see what took the animal, but whatever it was had been huge. Although everyone was very nervous and Oscar went immediately into the air to provide some protection from that vantage point, nothing further occurred. By using the horses and swimming strongly, they were all soon safely across and concealed in the trees. The wizard ceased his magical flight and joined them, and after a bit of ringing out, they began eagerly moving southward toward what they hoped was the goal of their quest. After somewhat over a mile of forcing their way through the tangled forest, they noticed that the trees were smaller and there were tamaracks and similar water-loving kinds ahead. Then the ground underfoot became spongy and wet, quickly turning into tussocked bits of earth separated by shallow water. Before long, they were fighting against the drag of the mud, dirty and dripping with ooze, carefully choosing their path so as to avoid mires and deep pools. There were large insects, huge spiders, and great goggle-eyed frogs here aplenty. The batrachians evidently fed on the insects and arachnids, keeping them in relatively low numbers, and there were monstrous cranes and other gigantic wading bears that must have found the fish and frogs of the marsh most beneficial. Other than sinking forever in the muck tuff, there was nothing hazardous here, at least during their passage, and the 13 bedraggled adventurers finally reached the piece of high, firm ground that formed a small peninsula jutting into the Jewel River. "Gods, you look a filthy mess," Deirdre said to Gard. The young thief had stumbled and fallen part way into the marsh, and then had covered himself with mud in the process of extricating himself. The female knight looked relatively thin and proper despite the trek, although her armor was solid and her hair somewhat limp with sweat. Gord tried to deaden his hands on his leggings, but got them only dirtier still, for the leather garments were caked with smelly black muck. He looked at his hands and couldn't resist. "And you look wonderful, Lady Chevalier," he exclaimed to Deirdre, and then patted her on both cheeks with his muddy palms and fingers. Deirdre tried to avoid the touch, but Gord was much too quick. "You nasty little bastard!" she shouted at him, taking a step backward and trying to draw forth her broadsword at the same time. Her foot struck something tough, so Deirdre overbalanced backward and sat down hard. "Oh, my dear," Gord said in mock sympathy, "you must be too exhausted to stand, or is it simply that a woman as large and clumsy as you are can manage a backward step without falling like an ox?" "Why, you," Deirdre managed. Her face flushed. Then Oscar was beside her, pressing her shoulders down so he couldn't stand, and struck the gaping teeth with her sword in her sudden ire. "Relax, love," the wizard said soothingly. We are all tired and in need of a bit of a breather. Don't let something foolish," and here he gazed meaningfully toward Gord, "betray your sworn oath to serve in this endeavor." Deirdre made a face at him, but she relaxed. "You do look rather silly now, dear," he said to the girl. "Almost as sorry... You do look rather silly now, dear," he said to the girl. "Almost as sorry as Gord there, and he's a muckworm if I ever laid eyes on one." Everyone laughed then, and the tension was dispelled. Deirdre actually grinned at Gord, sharing his discomfort at being tired and dirty, and recognizing him as part of her team, as it were. She tried to get a bit more comfortable on her seat. Then she suddenly jumped up and tore at the viny growth that had been under her. "What's wrong?" Gord exclaimed, rushing over to see if perhaps something had bitten her. "This is a stone block," Deirdre shouted. "I've been sitting on our lost ruin for 5 minutes without knowing it." Although the shadows were growing long, the whole group was so excited about the find that everyone wanted nothing more than to begin an immediate search for the great ziggurat at the center of the ancient metropolis. The area was so overgrown with ground cover, bushes, shrubs, and all sorts of trees that the party could not actually hope to do more than a cursory search before darkness. After an hour or so, Blanc came across a collapsed structure that was still accessible. A portion of the lower story made an acceptable shelter, the walls and roof overhead being relatively sound. The place would serve as shelter against the weather and the night prowlers. It was sufficiently large to allow the party to stable their horses as well, so before long all were securely housed with the entry partially blocked by chunks of masonry, magical guards in place, and a small fire going at the rear of the place. "This is not sure workmanship," Geller remarked as he studied the bas-relief carvings on the walls revealed by the ruddy firelight. "Come here, Carly, and take a look. This convoluted script is like none I've ever seen." Although time had worn the stone somewhat, the writing and carving were still clearly definable, sheltered as the stone was within the ruin. The druid agreed that it was totally unfamiliar. Gord took a look, as did Blanc, followed by Oscar. None recognized it as anything they had previously seen. No wonder that the Scarlet Brotherhood had no intelligence regarding this ruin. Legend had said the city of the Solois had been here, but this place was certainly of origination predating the migration of the invoked devastation by centuries. Iconsi was called over to examine it, but it was as puzzled as the rest. It bore no resemblance to any Flane work he had seen, he had seen, and he said he had seen some of the sacred writings and idols in Tan. This was a riddle not to be solved quickly, and certainly of no importance compared to their quest. Still, the two factors could somehow be linked, and God went to sleep considering such a possibility. Fearful of dreams such as those that had plagued him when he had been near another ruin, one imprisoning a demon, and we know well which. Deirdre had the watch just prior to Gord's turn. When she woke him, he felt terrible listlessness and vaguely recalled uneasy scenes from his sleep. He whispered that he was awake and ready to stand guard, but the tough cavalier was in no rush to return to her bed. "I'll keep you company, Gord, if you object not. I am too wide awake to slumber now, she added by way of explanation. Gord was surprised but readily agreed, for he felt uneasy. If you prefer the chill near the entry to a warm blanket, I have no objections to your company. I like this place not at all. It bothers you too, then? They moved to position near the entrance, and Gord related this adventure with the druid and shirt, involving a confrontation with a cataboline demon. He told Deirdre of the malign foreboding and awful nightmares that accompanied proximity to the ancient ringstones and the crypt beneath the central cairn. While this place was dissimilar, Gord asserted he also felt a bad premonition here, different but strong nonetheless. For once, Deirdre didn't scoff. I understand you're red, Gord. This is a place better left undiscovered, she whispered. As soon as we gain our prize, I wish nothing more than to leave it as far behind as possible, and never will I speak of it to another. Aye, Gord said in agreement. But think on this, the relic which is the counterbalance to the greatest evil was warded by a demon. What fell things are set around that which serves Taris Dune? Speak not that name, Deirdre hissed. Her look showed fear, and her voice shook as she spoke. Look the enacted prison or not, I think he can somehow still know and respond when his name is spoken. Remember, the savants say that the powers of evil still draw from the dream force of that terrible one. Her vehemence startled Gord, but the young thief readily understood her point and agreed. In the past, it was not much given to theological consideration of any sort, but this was different. Gord had learned many new things over the past year or two, and now his horizons had expanded further. Deirdre's warning could not be ignored. Yes, he said earnestly, you are right to rebuke me. I shall not be so careless in the future. Tell me, where do you think we should begin our explorations this morning? They spoke in whispers for the remainder of Gord's watch, and the golden light of the sun came soon to call the whole party to its task. End of chapter 7. And then we pass to chapter 8, another long one. How can the book be shorter than the first one and then the chapters be longer than that of the first one? I don't really know. Another 14 pages. Well, yeah, I know. Don't drink from bottle, but I have a filter, so I never trash a water bottle. I recycled them. Anyway, let's continue, because it's a bit late, but we can do another chapter, maybe two. Chapter 8. Malign hatred hung in the air. It seemed to permeate the great ghastly hall in layers of palpable evil. The closer one came to the throne of silver-set human bones, the stronger the hatred and the attendant fear became. Fair as it was the air, filled as it was with the noxious fumes of ordure and other substances even more disgusting, which smoked in foetid lumps on the hot coals of the demon-figured bronze braziers fanned before the black dias. If the stark city of Doraha was ugly and wicked, its palace was the nadir of such maleficence, and the reeking throne chamber its very pity. So tortuous its shapes, so horrific its decoration, so disgusting its every aspect, that few humans could remain sane within its confines. Men and women too were indeed therein, but of their sanity who could speak? These dozen figures stood unmoving, heads slightly bent in deference. Amid the waves of foul stench and washes of hatred, they awaited the word of their master, the occupant of the throne, the ruler of this place and all the lands around, the great Iuz. Well, the question hung in the thick air, the rasping wheeze that voiced it, a sound of bone or slate, rusted iron, drawn over splintered wood, somehow seemed to go on as if the moment will continue into eternity until the query was answered. A tall, emaciated man raised his eyes to the figure seated on the skull-ridden throne. A wizened old man sat there, a wrinkled, ancient figure whose eyes glowed with insane fires. These eyes looked upon those of the thin, tall mage, and the latter spoke quickly. We have no success, Lord of Eldritch Evil, hastening on before he could be interrupted, and being careful to avoid his master's baleful stare, the mage added, Even with our combined powers, Lord Iuz, the opposition is too great. Silence! Somehow the twin whiz met sounded this word shock each of the group who stood before the grim throne. The mage who was speaking when the command came had his jaws slammed shut, and his form twitched as if shaken by a giant invisible terrier. How dare you tell me you cannot succeed? The old figure trembled too, but with fury, and the wattles and wrinkles turned from grey to livid purple with emotion. You belittle the might of Iuz? Well, you fail, and that is a crime which I punish in a manner so as to make death longed for. With that, the horrible old man spat deliberately. The bed of spittle struck the quivering mage full in the forehead, and the thin magic user dropped as if struck by a hammer. Iuz will not bend his knee to anyone, cursed by the hierarchs and their diabolical masters, twice cursed by those red-gowned niglings who call themselves the Scarlet Brotherhood, thrice damned to everlasting and tormented sleep, be their Dark One, the one to bind all the evil together, never to bind. He paused in his tirade, looking from one to the other of the men and women before him, spellcasters all, whether magical or clerical. The one who lay still was the least amongst their number. These were the dregs of humanity, corrupt, evil, pitiless, deceitful, utterly without morals or virtue, but powerful and capable. Each bowed lower as the gaze of the master touched him or her, but each held his or her own hate and hubris up as a shield against the foul assault of Iuz's eyebite. This reaction pleased and amused the wizened ancient one into a fit of ghastly cackling. You are right, he said after the insidious laughter finally left him. Iuz is proud of such filth as you, for the dukes of the nine hells will shudder at your powers and the minds which command them. But I am Iuz, I command and you obey. Now gather up that lump of dog shit before my throne, or I shall burn him as I do other offal, and it will make a petty stench, I think. And then you will call upon your utmost and accomplish what is needed. I care not how. Do it! Sacrifice every virgin you can find. Call up those demons bound to you. Utilize any force necessary, but succeed. You have until tomorrow at this time. Do you understand? Yes, answered the Lord, they intoned in chorus. Tomorrow then, great as your reward for success will be, worse still the exaction for failure. Depart! Iuz watched the 11 slowly back from the chamber, one of their number using the humor of her staff to draw the comatose mage with them. When they were beyond the massive bronze-sheeted valves that allow entrance to the audience hall, the portal slammed shut at his wave, while several of the dretch who served as lackeys scudded hurriedly to avoid being crushed. One was too slow, and the massive doors decapitated it as they closed. Iuz stayed still for a moment, enjoying the sight of the headless body of the demonling flopping about. Other dretches quickly removed it tough, slobbering up the gore as they did so. Iuz chuckled, but this time in a bass tone that resonated through the stone chamber. His loutish servants hunched their gross bodies closer to the flags of the floor at this. In seconds, all were gone from view. The cruel mirth boomed forth again, and the end user rose from his massive chair of bone, skull, silver, and gems. He now stood well over 7 feet tall, and his features were unquestionably demoniac. It was time for him to visit his Serrallo. Iuz had many concubines, human, semi-human, and demon spawn as well. Who could say which he enjoyed most, beautiful or refiling, malformed and ugly? Mammalian or reptilian, Iuz was a cambion, after all, the bastard son of a demon mated with a woman. In him, the worst of demon and human had combined to form the ancient one, the old Iuz, Lord of Evil. He was full of hatred and malign purpose, and several hours spent disporting himself in disarray only served to increase his tension. Perverse and sadistic pleasures had served no purpose in this regard. Iuz silently cursed all, as was his habit. It seemed as if many great beings and powerful persons had conspired directly against him of late, the last century in actual time, but to Iuz this was lately. While there was a certain sense of pride gained from this, a recognition of Iuz's true merit, as it were, the combination had harmed him nonetheless. First his mother, Igwilv, had turned against him, then disappeared. It was with her help that he had gained his realm, and she had promised to aid in its expansion. Well, rot air, then grasped. Disease wrought his vitals, had been removed from his skin too. Grasped. Iuz, dear father, Iuz sneered at the thought, had actually done for his mother, and thus done for a portion of his son's immediate ambitions. Well, what would come next was yet to be seen. As if that weren't enough, Iuz himself had been tricked by an unmentionable being, and imprisoned. He, Iuz, it had taken many years to manage an escape, because the one who confined him was so irrational that no normal reasoning could break the bonds, but break free he did, only to find the lick-spittle servants of Hades and Tartarus lording it over a portion of his realm. Yes, these Demodan-kissing little humans and their masters of ranked fireball fodder had proclaimed the eastern half of Iuz, his realm, as theirs. Being weakened from day-long imprisonment, and needing to regroup his followers and gather more, Iuz had to smile and show friendship. Yes, he loved it when the dreaded hierarchs made Molag, his Molag, summer capital of the realm, their scut of power. Of course, he was pleased that their so-called horned society was there to combat the stinking fools who served good. After all, he had been detained elsewhere, hadn't he? Someone had to carry on the fight. When former allies swore fealty to the hierarchs, Iuz had never reproached them. Never. That would have bespoken possible enmity, and Iuz was on good terms with all those who serve evil, wasn't he? Of course he was anything but he needed to gain strength and time. Then his dear lady, Queen Zuktmoy, came and joined with him. Together they would bring all Hoert under his rule, spread their pets over its surface, and jointly take their pleasure there, or on Zuktmoy's plain in the abyss. After all, there would be time then for planning new conquests on other worlds and planes. But as with Igwilv, Grazd, and even himself, the demoness too was stripped from his skin, and foes pressed him from all sides. Iuz knew which beings, and humans too, were responsible, and one day they would be called to account. Even stripped as he was of allies and friends, Iuz was by no means without resources. Foremost among them, naturally, were his own mighty intellect and powers. Then he had his servants, numbering in the tens of thousands, humans, demi-humans, humanoids, and even a number of major demons. Although he distrusted most of the latter, for they either spied for grudge or merely sought to curry favor without promising any real assistance. The Drow were of some help. These dark elves had abandoned the old service of the supposed elemental evil that had been his and Queen Zuktmoy's ploy anyway. To imagine that anyone could swallow the concept still caused Iuz to laugh with fiendish delight. What was more chaotic indeed than the ravening elements? At least a quarter of this naked Drow now served Iuz, much to the dismay of their mighty demoness mistress. Although Iuz did not wish to anger her, for the time for such confrontation was later, he did need those dark elves. Bandits and humanoids dregs were fine, but real power was in his hands, and the hands of those exceptional humans and demi-humans who had dedicated themselves to his service. Iuz knew full well that there were men and women of great talent and power. Their might was such that they could challenge the rulers of the lower planes. Such of these as he could gather he cherished in his own and degrading way. 6 of the greatest he had, and 6 just a little lesser, and 6 others beside that. Each of the first 2 groups knew of each other, but of the last 6 they knew nothing, just as each one in that latter group knew nothing of the others. As the first and second 6s worked and wrote as usual, the others did his bidding as well, only without any knowledge save their masters. Somewhere in the wide Flenaeus were a human, a dwarf, an elf, a gnome, a halfling, and a half-elf, each supposing that he or she alone was a secret servant of the Lord of Ancient Evil. Now each had a special mission to fulfill. Iuz took no chances. Still in the tall, fat, demoniac form, Pherapsis through one, Iuz passed through a secret panel and descended a worn flight of steps. The labyrinth beneath his palace was extensive, but few, if any, besides the ancient Cambion knew its full extent. After a time, he came to a natural grotto, a place warmed by water from the limestone. It was one of his favorite places, for the shade formed by the slowly dripping water had made grotesqueries. Iuz had added his own touches, so that now the place resembled a nightmare world. He loved it. Calcified bodies writhed in stony agony, things leered, disgusting acts were committed to slowly evolving fruition by carefully channeled water. Here he and Zuktmoy had spent much time, and she had created a fungi garden unparalleled in nature. Its revolting colors, forms, and scents were even disquieting to use at times. Marvelous. Now, however, there were visitors occupying this secret garden, as it were. "Welcome, Lord Iuz," piped a voice from nearby. 3 small drows stepped back, bowing. These were priests of Grazd, inconsiderable nothings, as were the 3 magic users who rounded out the male contingent of the Dark Elves. There were also a pair of female clerics and the female leader of the embassy. These 2 likewise bowed to Iuz, informing him that their mistress was expecting him. There, in a small, richly furnished alcove, was a Clavdra, ambassador to the court, and leader of the Ealserv clan, and all those drow who followed it. A lot of names from the Temple of Elemental Evil. A lot of spoilers for my players in my Dungeons & Dragons group. I hope they didn't listen this one. Damn. "You look well, Lord," the beautiful Clavdra said sweetly in her lilting soprano voice, as she idly plucked another leg from a huge spider she had pinned to a table with a slender stiletto. "Your loving father sends you his greetings." "Leave off the mockery, Clavdra, and cease that foolishness with the eight-legger. I have things of import to discuss." The beautiful dark elf laughed at the crudest laugh Iuz had been treated to in too long a time. "No mockery, Lord of Evil. See?" A Clavdra thrust her lovely ebon arm before the shivering mandibles of the pain-racked Black Widow. Instantly the creature closed its jaws and pumped its venom, but instead of the expected result, the great spider suddenly released its hold, uttering a screeching chitter in a terrible agony as it did so, and visibly disintegrated to a bubbling, soapy mass of fullness before Iuz's surprised gaze. "The mighty Grazd, your father, has bestowed a small favor upon me, Lord Iuz," she explained as she angrily enjoyed the last of the putrefaction on the table, and has likewise given me advice to pass along to his son. Iuz ground his sharp-pointed teeth at the studied insult, but he forced a smile and cocked one eyebrow in inquiry. All took this made his countenance more ghastly and demoniacal than ever. A Clavdra seemed unaffected. "Mighty Grazd has recently triumphed, and now fully 3 layers of the abyss are at the prince's command. In celebration, Mighty Grazd has granted amnesty to your mother, Egvilv. Provided she obeys, he will lose her to aid his son's cause here on Earth." "What?" This was astounding news. Iuz interjected the question as much to use magic to determine the truth of what this drow high priestess was saying as to express his incredulity. My words are not false, Lord of Evil, Eclavdra said with her beautiful wicked smile. But hear me out, for there is much more. Speak on then, dark elf female, but remember that you speak to Iuz. And Lord Iuz must remember that he speaks to the chosen one of grass. Eclavdra returned in icy warning. Let us leave that aside, for it is both as ambassador of all true dark elves and as high priestess of mighty grass that I apprise you now. Those who rule the abyss are alerted to the danger which faces them all. None will serve as underlings of that one who will not name, but most will agree to no joint plan of action. The two who claim greatest lordship tear at each other and your father, and with them fury a third of the others align, as suits their purpose, and the balance tilts. A certain few have aligned with mighty grass, however, and with success here, your father knows others will follow. This, then, is what he charges his son with. You are to make no attempt to contact your mother, Igwilv, until she has accomplished her task. Before you object, Graz wishes you to know that your mother is charged with finding and freeing Winzuktmoi, providing that she, Lady of Fungi, accepts the overlordship of Graz and agrees to assist you in conquest of this world. So, the mother of Iuz is in the Temple of Elemental Evil? I don't really know. As Eclavdra made this last statement, Iuz's mind was racing. So Graz thought that subjugate the abyss through extraordinary means. Iuz had to admire the temerity of his father. If Zuktmoi were forced to swear allegiance to him, Graz will not only expand his territory, but the impact on his influence will be tenfold. Every demon lord and lady would have to think carefully about incurring the enmity of so powerful a combination. Already Yenogu, the demon lord of New Worlds, was allied with Grast. Iuz grinned, knowing that allegiance could be broken as readily as sworn to. Let his lady Zuktmoi swear, and with her, Igwilv too. None could stand before his conquest of this entire planet. The time was ripe for it, after all. The regimented and bureaucratic hierarchs had embroiled their horned society in a useless war with the free lords of the bandit kingdoms, while the strutting, posturing minions of the Scarlet Brotherhood puffed themselves up with dreams of ruling all under the benighted power of that one who must slumber everlastingly. As fragmented as the forces of the Abyss were, their very nature made them unpredictable, while their numbers were undeniably equal to all others who opposed them, good and evil alike. Those fools who sought neutral balance will never commit themselves in time to prevent the Iuz's mantle of empire from covering all Hoard. Then, oh yes, then, Iuz will show mighty Grast and others too, who was true lord of all. Iuz's penetrating stare had been fixed upon Eclavdra as his mind raced over the prospects of what she had said. Whether this gaze had made her pause, or whether she was waiting for a reply before continuing, Iuz could not guess. Although the dark elf's jet black complexion seemed a trifle paler, Iuz decided to break the silence. "That, dear High Priestess," he said flightily, "is a revelation indeed. I must need think on the import a time. But pray go on with your message as I ponder." "Yes, Lord Iuz," Eclavdra said, with a hint of a trembling betrayed in the last note. She looked away for a moment and picked up a flagon form from a small skull, chased with gold and bestudded with a rainbow of small gems. After draining its content of black liquor to the dregs, pretending thirst and dry throat from her speech, the Drow cleric faced Iuz again, her confidence restored. Dealing with this one, the greatest and most evil of all cambions, was trying, even with the ultimate knowledge that the grass spoke through air. "My lord," she continued, "your father charges you with the location of one or both of the remaining portions of the tripartite artifact of all evil. He says that the leak spitals of the Scarlet Brotherhood are ready to hold that portion dear to the Abyss, and even now they seek the part which commands their ilk. Those who sit astride the Dukes of Hell and think themselves the most fit." He orders you to gain it instead and pass it to me for conveyance to a place of safekeeping, which your father will determine. Iuz detected her lie as she said this, and picked up an unguarded thought that told him she intended to use the portion of the artifact to bend all the road to her will, a counter to Iuz's own empire above. Eclavdra studied the towering campion's features for a hint of a reaction, while Iuz only nodded thoughtfully as if considering. Mighty Graz has many of his servants in and on Earth, searching for the location of that portion which rules ordered evil. You are to join this effort, searching the southern realms, midway between your own holding and that land ruled by the pale Sulois jackals in their red garments. I see, murmured Iuz softly, and is there more from my caring progenitor? Eclavdra swallowed, but said her sculpted feature firmly replied. The new master of the Abyss commands your absolute obedience and the faithful fulfillment of his instructions. Failure will mean the end of your domain here, your death. Mighty Graz promises that his son, Endigvelv, and the demoness Zuktmoi too, will meet utter destruction at his hands should you fail in your mission. Before he will bow to the ultimate sleeper, those instruments which have failed as a purpose will be removed from existence to lessen his humiliation. That is all. Iuz rose to his full height, looming over the seated drow as a giant above a halfling. Rage flushed his reddish complexion to a maroon color that a pit fiend would have been proud to possess. His peregrine eyes fairly burned, and he trembled with suppressed fury. Now Eclavdra reacted, recoiling from the massive figure in fear for her life, hastily trying to prepare some defense against his impending assault. His eyes froze her before she could begin the somatic gesture of her incantation. One long, sinewy finger pointed its black, talon-tipped length at her, and the high priestess of Graz forgot her exalted master and his aegis. Eclavdra dropped to her knees in front of him and clasped her hands before her in supplication. Before she could utter any pleading, Iuz himself spoke. Never, never again speak to me as an equal, he hissed through his clenched needle-like teeth. That position is appropriate, he continued as he grasped Eclavdra by her silken white tresses and forced her head further back, so that the drow had no choice but to meet his burning gaze squarely. If needs be, you may stand before me, head bowed, but I find this more pleasing for many reasons. Yes, I see you understand. Now you listen as I tell you what your reply to Graz is to be. I speak as equal to equal, not as son to father, nor as lesser to greater. I will aid Graz against his enemies, just as he will aid me against mine, as one king makes pact with another. Graz's realms and my own are separated, different. We shall both profit from a mutual success, and neither threatens the other. Tell him that, and inform him also that I am many leagues ahead of him. I already sussed out. And Iuz laughter here was awful, as he threw his head back at the play on words and allowed peals of demoniac glee to roll from his throat. The whereabouts of the second portion of the key to the prison of that one who must never awaken. He paused to eye the kneeling drow cleric, then continued. Tell my concerned parent that even now one of my own loyal servants carries it to me. Tell him that he commands neither me nor mine, thus Graz. I shall retain the eldritch object in my possession, and I shall otherwise do as I think best. Of course, always in the interest of furthering the ultimate ends of our alliance. Lastly, inform the Prince of the Abyss that I shall seek out my mother. I shall aid her mission. I shall personally welcome Zuktmoi to our alliance, and because of this I shall take responsibility for her complete agreement and cooperation. Cooperation amongst equals. Remember that, drow. Equals. Now finish your work, and hurry off to pass this message, this wall encounter, back to Graz, where we must remain fixed for decades yet. Upon the layers he rules in the great abyss. The high priestess arose and hurried off, not daring to utter any reply. Iuz smiling louder rolled after her. A cloud ignored it, vowing to have her vengeance in due course upon the fat, red pig who called himself Lord of Evil. Iuz meanwhile was thinking of the day to come when he will show his loving father the true worth of his offspring, and will do so in terms that left no uncertainty as to who was in shadow, who in glory. This did not distract him from the object of his current desire, the determination of just how successful his minions were in their mission. Iuz dare not scry often, nor employ great powers in tracking or assisting them, for to do so was sure to draw the attention of those who served Hades, Hell, and those multitudes on the lower planes who sought to the revival of Taurus Dune. He shocked in anger even thinking the name, for it brought fear to him, and Iuz dared not speak the cursed syllables of that one's name aloud. He used one of his black gown magic users to discover the information needed. This too frustrated Iuz, but the expediency was bearable for the nonce. Soon the Lord of Evil stood guised in his ancient form, while the six of greatest standing performed their duties. A large pool of inky blackness rippled and shimmered, and before his eyes there swam the scene he desired to view. End of chapter 8. And the next one is also longer, 15 pages. I don't understand very well this book, so we stop here for today, only 2, but they are a lot longer than the first book. I really don't understand. Anyway, we stop here. Because I have to return to work. So for today is all. We continue the reading tomorrow, Saturday, for I hope 3, maybe 4, even 4 chapters. I really hope 4. But anyway, for today is all. So have a good afternoon, have a good dinner, have a good night, have a good evening, have a good everything. And I hope my players of Dungeons & Dragons didn't hear this one, because I spoiled a lot of things for them. Anyway, till the next time. Bye!